Picture the most glamorous room you can imagine. Now picture the room directly behind it. The Moulin Rouge, Les Folies Bergères, the Lido, the Casino de Paris. You know these names. You've seen the posters. The women with the feathered headdresses, the long legs, the enormous smiles, the sequins catching gaslight and turning everything to gold. You've seen the paintings. Toulouse-Lautrec made sure of that. The can-can, the champagne, the men in top hats watching from the darkness with their glasses raised. Paris in the 1920s, the most glamorous city in the most glamorous decade in the history of the world. Les années folles, the crazy years, that's what they called them. The war was over, the dead were buried, and Paris decided collectively to dance until it forgot everything. Here's what the posters don't show. The smell of 30 women sweating in a room the size of a large closet, all of them changing at once in the 45 seconds between Act 2 and Act 3. The grease paint caking into the creases of their necks where they didn't blend properly. The gas lamps and the early electric bulbs both burning at once because the theatre can't afford to commit to one or the other, and the combination turns the air thick and yellow and slightly poisonous. The blood seeping through the silk toe of a point shoe, turning the fabric from ivory to rust, and the girl wearing it not saying a word, just wrapping it tighter with a scrap of cotton and going back out. The champagne is for the audience. Backstage, everyone drinks cheap red wine from a bottle passed hand to hand, not from pleasure, but from necessity, because your hands are shaking from cold and nerves and 2 days of not eating properly. The feathers cost 40 francs apiece. The girls who wear them earn 12 francs a week. You know the feathers. You've pinned them on yourself 100 times, 1,000 times, your fingers moving so fast that by the end of the night you can't feel the tips anymore. The feathers are real. The ostrich plumes come from South Africa, packed in crates that arrive at the back door, smelling of something you can't identify, something animal and hot and strange. Each one has to be cleaned, recurled with a hot iron, stitched onto the wire frame that the girls balance on their heads for the finale. The frames weigh 4 kilograms, sometimes 5. That's roughly the weight of a newborn baby, balanced on top of your skull, while you smile and kick your leg above your ear and make it look effortless. Nothing about this is effortless. That's what I'm going to show you tonight. We're going to Paris. Not the Paris of cafes and artists and Hemingway drinking in the afternoon sun. Not the Paris of the Eiffel Tower and the Seine and a beret and a baguette. We're going to the other Paris, the one you don't see from the front of the house. We're going backstage. 1 week, 1 dressing room, 1 girl who makes the dream possible for everyone else. Her name is Marguerite, and nobody important knows her name, so get comfortable. We're going in. You smell it before you reach the door. The stage door of the Théâtre du Ciel Rose is on the Rue Lepic, which is already not a gentle smell at any hour. Montmartre in October. The charcoal sellers are out before dawn, their carts leaving trails of grey dust on the cobblestones. The bakeries are firing up, and for exactly 1 block, between the boulangerie on the corner and the tobacco shop with the broken shutter, the air smells like bread and nothing else. Then you turn the corner into the alley, and the bread smell disappears. The stage door opens onto a narrow cut between 2 buildings, just wide enough for a delivery cart to squeeze through. The alley smells of everything the theatre doesn't want the audience to see. Old costumes stored in bags because there's nowhere else to put them. Gas from the pipes that run along the left wall. A low sweet smell that means someone has left a valve slightly open again. cigarette smoke from the stagehands who come out here between scenes because the artistic director, Monsieur Beaumont, has forbidden smoking inside, which is in fact the only rule he enforces with anything approaching consistency. And underneath all of that, the bass note that never goes away. The smell of women working hard in an enclosed space. Sweat and powder and cheap perfume and the particular sharp smell of theatrical grease paint, which is made from zinc oxide and lard and pigment, and which smells honestly like nothing else on earth. You either know that smell or you don't. Once you know it, you never forget it. You know it. Your name is Marguerite Laval. You're 19 years old. You arrived in Paris 14 months ago from Saint-Brieuc, in Brittany, with a cardboard suitcase, a letter of introduction from your dance teacher to a woman she knew who worked at the Folies, and exactly 42 francs and 50 centimes. The dance teacher's contact turned out to have left the Folies 2 years earlier, after a disagreement about a costume that became a disagreement about wages that became a screaming match in the third-floor corridor that ended with someone throwing a shoe. This happens a lot in theatre. You've learned. The 42 francs lasted 9 days. You are now a habileuse at the Théâtre du Ciel Rose, which means you dress the performers, which means you are the person who pins the feathers and laces the corsets and holds the costume in exactly the right position, so the girl can step into it in 4 seconds in complete darkness, with one hand braced on your shoulder. You have been doing this for 11 months. You're good at it. You're not supposed to be good at it. You are supposed to be a dancer. But here you are. You push open the stage door with your shoulder because your hands are full. Left hand, a paper bag containing 2 croissants, one for you and one for Sylvie, who has the cot next to yours in the room on the Rue des Abbesses that you share with 4 other girls, none of whom work at the same theatre, which means the schedule conflicts create a kind of permanent low-level domestic chaos that you have all stopped trying to resolve and now simply navigate by feel, like moving through a dark room. Right hand, a basket covered with a cloth, inside which are 12 feet of black grosgrain ribbon that needs to be sewn back onto the bottom hem of costume number 4, a tin of spirit gum, a spool of heavy thread in 3 colours, a card of hooks and eyes, a tiny bottle of hydrogen peroxide for removing blood from white fabric, and a jar of beeswax mixed with petroleum jelly that you make yourself from a recipe the head seamstress, Madame Arnaud, gave you on your 3rd day for sealing the girl's blistered feet. You're carrying more useful things in that basket than most doctors carry in their bags. The door closes behind you with a thud that echoes down the stone corridor. Deep breath. Here we go. The Ciel Rose has 3 dressing rooms. The first is for Madeleine. Madeleine Voss is the star. She has her own room on the 1st floor, slightly larger than a generous closet, with a dedicated mirror surrounded by electric bulbs. 40-watt bulbs, not the 45 that the Folies uses for its principal performers, a distinction that Madeleine is aware of and that surfaces in conversation approximately once per week. The room smells of the perfume she has shipped from a perfumier in Grasse, something floral and complicated and expensive, a smell that says very clearly without words that you're in the presence of someone whose life is different from yours. Madeleine Voss earns 400 francs a week. Her name is on the posters in letters as tall as your forearm. The second room is for the specialty acts, the acrobats, the comedian, the couple who do the Apache dance where the man throws the woman across the stage by her wrists and it looks violent because it is slightly violent, and she has bruises on both forearms that she covers with foundation makeup and long gloves. They share a room that is slightly smaller than Madeleine's, containing a broken chair, a mirror with a crack running diagonally across the lower left corner, and a coat rack from which things are always falling. The third room is yours. Well, not yours. The third room belongs to 24 girls, 24 chorus girls, 3 habeleuses including you, 1 seamstress who comes in 4 nights a week, and Madame Arnaud, who is officially the costume mistress and unofficially the person who makes every decision that actually matters in this theatre, at a salary that is somehow even lower than yours. The room is approximately 5 meters by 7 meters. You know this because you have paced it in moments of stress, which has become a form of meditation. 5 meters, 7 meters, 35 square meters, less than a square meter and a half per person, accounting only for the permanent staff on nights when the specialty performers need to use your room because there's a water leak in theirs, which happens roughly twice a month because the pipes in this building date from the 1880s and have been persuaded to keep working through a combination of hope and improvised wrenching. The per-person square meterage drops below 1. This is normal. Everywhere else is the same or worse. The room contains a long table running the full length of the left wall, bolted to the wall because it fell off twice before someone thought to bolt it. On this table, mirrors propped at various angles, not hung but propped, because the wall cannot support mirror hooks, a fact that Monsieur Beaumont is aware of and that has been on the list of things to be fixed since the previous artistic director's time. In front of each mirror, a wooden stool. Above the table, a shelf containing the greasepaint in its various forms, the white base, the pinks and reds and browns for contouring, the black for the eyes, the carmine for the lips, the powder in its cardboard boxes, and the powder puffs, and the brushes, and the small hinged mirrors that the girls bring from home, and which are the only pieces of equipment in this room that any of them actually own. On the right wall, the costume rack, 3 rails, iron pipes suspended from the ceiling by chains, and on them the costumes for this week's show, Étoiles du ciel, Stars of the Sky, the autumn production that opened 3 weeks ago, and will run through to Christmas if it doesn't have any problems, which it will. The costumes weigh more than they look. Each one involves a base garment, a leotard or a corset and skirt combination depending on the act, and then layers, feathers or sequins or fringes or all 3. The sequins are sewn individually onto netting backings by women in a workshop on the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Martin. Women you will never meet but whose work you handle every day, each sequin sewn with 3 stitches, and you know this because when a sequin falls off, you sew it back on. 3 stitches. And sometimes you think about those women, their fingers moving through the same motions thousands of times per day, in a workshop that almost certainly smells different from yours but is probably also too warm and too crowded. It is 6:45 in the morning. You're the first one here. You light the small stove in the corner. It burns coal, and the coal scuttle is half empty, which means someone needs to get more, which means you. And you hang your basket on the hook next to the door. That is specifically your hook, the one you claimed on your 2nd week, by writing your initials on it in spirit gum, which has never fully come off, and you pull up your stool in front of costume number 4. The hem, 12 feet of black grosgrain ribbon, unstitch the old, repin the new, sew it flat, press it if there's time. Your fingers find the seam. The first stitch comes undone. You start. The smell of the dressing room builds as the morning progresses. The coal in the stove catches around 7, and for the first 20 minutes it smokes, which means the room fills with a thin grey haze that makes your eyes water and deposits a very faint layer of soot on the white costumes if you're not careful, which is why you've learned to cover them with a sheet of muslin every morning until the stove stops smoking. Madame Arnaud taught you this. There are 100 small things Madame Arnaud has taught you that nobody wrote down anywhere. By 7:30 the first girls arrive. They come in ones and twos, pulling coats tight against the October morning, some of them still half asleep, some of them clearly having not slept at all. You can tell the ones who've been out by the way they move. Slightly careful, slightly deliberate, like they're navigating on a ship in mild weather. It's not disapproval in you when you notice this. It's just information. After 11 months, you've catalogued all the variables that affect a girl's performance by approximately 20% in either direction. A good night's sleep, performance up 20%. A late night at a brasserie but only wine, down 5. A late night with champagne at someone's private apartment in the 6e, down 15. A late night involving a genuine emotional crisis, variable and dangerous because girls in emotional crises forget to look where they're going in the dark during quick changes, and that's how accidents happen. You don't have a late night social life. You can't afford it in money or in performance consequences. The girls shed their coats and sit at their mirrors and start the morning ritual. Madame Arnaud arrives at 8, already carrying her clipboard. She's never without the clipboard. It is as much a part of her person as her left hand. And she walks the length of the room making small notes without speaking. She's 43 years old. She's been working in Parisian cabarets since she was 17. She has, as she will tell you if you ask, and sometimes if you don't, seen everything twice. Her hair is pinned up in a way that suggests it was once, a long time ago, pinned up elegantly, and has been repinned in a very similar fashion every morning since then, as a kind of tribute to that original arrangement. Her hands are extraordinary. The skin on her knuckles is so dry it has cracked in multiple places, and the cracks don't heal completely because they reopen every time she works with her hands, which is always, and there is a permanent faint red line along the side of her right index finger from a cut she got from a piece of wire in the dress of the lead in the last production 6 weeks ago. That simply refuses to close. She notices the hem you're working on. She stops. She leans down and examines the edge of the ribbon without touching it, which you have learned is professional courtesy. She will not touch another abeluse's work in progress unless invited, even though technically all of this is her domain. Tighter at the corners, she says. Not a criticism, a fact. Yes, madame. She moves on. That's the whole exchange. You pull the corner tighter, she's right. By 9 o'clock, 22 of the 24 girls have arrived. 2 are absent. 1, Céline, is sick. She has been sick for 4 days with something chest-related that she is managing with a bottle of syrup from the pharmacy on Pigalle, and an absolute refusal to acknowledge that she might need a doctor, which you understand because a doctor costs money, and there is no sick pay in the chorus of the Théâtre du Ciel Rose. If you're sick and you don't perform, you don't get paid. If you don't get paid, you can't eat. If you can't eat, you get sicker. The other absent girl is Josette. Nobody asks where Josette is. Josette was seen leaving with a man from the audience on Friday night, a man in a very good coat who was wearing a watch that cost more than this entire building is worth. Josette will be back, or she won't. If she's not back by Thursday, she loses her place to the girl from the waiting list. there is always a waiting list, and someone new will sit at her mirror and wear her costume, which will need to be taken in by 2 centimetres because Josette was always slightly more substantial than the costume design had anticipated, a fact that cost you 45 minutes of refitting on opening night. The 22 girls present range in age from 16. Emile, who joined 3 months ago from a dance school in Lyon and who still occasionally looks around the room with an expression of mild horror that she hasn't quite learned to conceal, to 28, which is Bette, the dance captain, who's been here 6 years and who runs the room with a quiet precision that Monsieur Beaumont thinks is his to command and is not. Bette is the most important person in this theatre. Monsieur Beaumont is the most important person in this theatre in his own head, but in practical terms, Bette is the axis on which everything rotates. She is short, broad-shouldered for a dancer, with feet that you have seen out of the shoe and that look like something from a medical textbook. The big toes deformed from years of point work, the skin on the balls of her feet so calloused it has lost all sensitivity. She has performed with a stress fracture in her right foot for 6 weeks. She told you this on the 7th week after it healed. You asked why she didn't say anything at the time. Because what would that have changed, she said. Nothing. It would have changed nothing. That's the answer, and both of you know it. Bette sits at the mirror, second from the right, not the first. That belongs to whoever is the newest girl and is there for a kind of test position. Too close to the door, a cold draught in winter. And she begins her makeup with the focused efficiency of someone performing a technical task. White base. Let it dry. First layer of foundation. Build up the cheekbones with the deeper tone. Lips with carmine, applied with a brush, and then pressed together and applied again. Eyes last. The black liner. The mascara made from beeswax and coal dust that has to be applied with a dry brush. Not the brush they sell with it, which is too soft. You're watching this while you sew. You're always watching, even when it doesn't look like you are. The rules of the room, which are not written down anywhere. First rule, the mirror nearest the window belongs to whoever has seniority that day. If Bette is here, Bette has it. On Bette's day off, it's Clémentine, who's been here 3 years. This is not negotiated. It is simply known. Second rule, you do not borrow another girl's powder puff without asking. This sounds trivial. It is not. Skin conditions spread. The grease paint base is shared community property, and you use your own applicator, always, without exception. Third rule, the coal stove stays lit until midnight on performance nights. It is collectively maintained. If you use the last of the coal, you go get more before you leave. This rule is violated approximately twice a month, and the violation is always by someone who has been here less than 3 months. Fourth rule, you do not discuss a performer's personal life in the room unless she brings it up first. Not the men waiting at the stage door. Not the reasons a girl came in with a bruise she covered with foundation. Not who is being paid to do what by whom. Everyone knows these things. Nobody says them out loud. Fifth rule. When Madame Arnaud walks in, you're already working. You're always already working. The costumes for Étoile du Ciel are, objectively, beautiful objects. This is worth saying before you spend more time with them, because by the end of a week of handling them, pinning them, repairing them, pressing them, wrestling them onto 24 bodies twice nightly, the beauty of them starts to become invisible to you, the way the face of a person you live with becomes invisible, replaced by the specific problems their face presents. The asymmetry in the jaw, the scar, the habit they have of blinking unevenly when they're nervous. But the costumes are beautiful. They were designed by a man named Gaston Fèvre, who was brought in from the opera at considerable expense, and who spent approximately 6 weeks in consultation with Monsieur Beaumont producing sketches, and then designs, and then patterns, and who, when presented with the realities of the production budget, produced a revised set of designs that retained the essential vision while reducing the cost by 30%, and then departed to his next commission. Gaston Fèvre has never dressed a performer. He has never held a corset open while a girl stepped into it with 30 seconds to spare. He has never repaired a feather mount at 2 a.m. while the girl who wears it stands very still, trying not to breathe while you work around her head. His designs are beautiful, and they are in places technically insane. Costume number 4, the one you're hemming, is the main piece for the Midnight Sky sequence. It involves a black silk base with silver beading across the bodice, each bead hand-sewn through the silk and the backing gauze, 1,200 beads per garment, multiplied by 12 costumes in this size, that's 14,400 individual bead applications, each requiring 3 passes of thread. The skirt is constructed in 7 layers of black and silver tulle cut on the bias, which means that gravity is constantly trying to distort it, and the hem needs re-leveling approximately once per week. The back fastens with 22 hooks and eyes running from the waist to the shoulder blades. You can do 22 hooks in 48 seconds on a cooperative body. Not every body is cooperative. Above the bodice sits the headdress. The headdress for the Midnight Sky costume is, as I mentioned, approximately 4 kilograms. The frame is aluminium wire, relatively new material, lighter than steel, not light enough, shaped into a crescent moon, approximately 60 centimeters across, covered with more of the black and silver beading, and then topped with 8 ostrich plumes, dyed a deep blue black, that is maintained by weekly re-dyeing because they fade under the stage lights, which are hot and bright and strip pigment the way sunlight strips fabric. The headdress attaches to the performer's head with 4 prongs, each prong resting on a specific point of the skull that you've mapped on each of the 12 girls who wear this costume with the same precision you would use to find a pressure point for a medical procedure. Wrong position, and the frame sits crooked. Crooked frame means crooked feathers. Crooked feathers means Monsieur Beaumont's voice from the wings, which is a sound you have learned to dread. The frame also causes headaches. All of them have headaches on performance nights. You keep a bottle of aspirin in the basket. The aspirin come out of your wages. Let me tell you what 12 francs a week actually is in Paris in 1926. A room on the Rue des Abbesses, a single room with a window shared with one other girl, costs 18 francs a month. You split this with Sylvie, which makes it 9 francs a month each. This is the cheapest room you could find that doesn't have rodents visibly moving in the walls. It has rodents invisibly moving in the walls. You've stopped thinking about this. You earn 12 francs a week. That is 48 francs per month before anything else. Food costs, eating cheaply but adequately, approximately 25 francs per month. This covers 2 meals a day from the market stalls, bread in the mornings, sometimes a bowl of soup from the cafe on the corner, occasionally a piece of meat from the butcher on Tuesdays when he puts out the cheaper cuts. Room, 9 francs. Food, 25 francs. That is 34 francs, leaving 14. From the 14, thread and pins and spirit gum for your basket. which you purchase yourself because the theatre's supply budget is charitably aspirational. Coal for the room stove, which you share the cost of with the 4 other girls in the building. Soap. Stockings. Stockings are expensive and they run and tear, and you go through 1 pair every 2 weeks if you're careful. The occasional doctor. Shoes. The math gets tight very quickly. The chorus girls earn slightly more than you. 16 to 18 francs, depending on seniority. The specialty performers earn 30 to 60, depending on their act and how replaceable Monsieur Beaumont thinks they are. Bette earns 22, plus a small choreography stipend that Monsieur Beaumont tried to remove last spring and couldn't because the girls threatened, collectively, quietly, through Madame Arnaud's offices, to develop a collective bout of influenza on the opening weekend of the summer show. Madeleine earns 400. The gap between Madeleine and the chorus girl in the 7th position from the left is not a gap. It's an ocean. They work in the same room and inhabit completely different worlds. This is the reality that the audience does not see. From the front of the house, looking at the stage in the 2nd act of Étoile du Ciel, what you see is a cascade of identical beauty. 12 girls, apparently interchangeable, all smiling, all moving in perfect synchrony, all equally gilded and sequined and feathered. What you see from the backstage side is 12 girls with 12 different economic situations, 12 different health situations, 12 different relationships with food. Because at this level of the industry, in this decade, in this city, you are expected to be a certain shape. And being a certain shape on 16 francs a week requires choices that are not neutral choices. Choices about which meals you skip. Choices about whether the dizziness you've had for the past 3 days is something you mention, or something you push through. You push through. They all push through. That's the other thing you carry in your basket. The knowledge of exactly how much push is left in each of them before something breaks. You finish the hem at 10:15. You stand, stretch your back. Your lower back has been tightening since August from the bent forward working posture, and you've taken to stretching it against the edge of the table, which looks undignified but helps, and hold the dress at arm's length. The ribbon lies flat and even. The corners don't pull. Madame Arnaud is behind you before you register her presence. "Better," she says. She takes the dress from you, turns it to look at the inside seam, runs her thumb along the stitching. "You're using the wrong thread tension," she says. It's not an accusation. It's information. I used the setting you showed me. The setting changes. In cold weather, she hands the dress back. The thread contracts. You have to compensate by going slightly looser. Otherwise, by the 3rd performance, the seam starts to pull. She demonstrates on a scrap of fabric from her coat pocket. She always has fabric in her pockets. Fabric and thread and at least 3 pins stuck through the lapel, which is how you know she's been doing this job for a very long time. Feel the difference. You feel the difference. Try the 3rd costume from the right. The seam at the right shoulder has been pulling. Might need to redo it. She moves away. You take costume number 3 from the right off the rail. She is right. The seam is starting to pull. You rip it, repin it, start again. This is how she teaches. Not lectures, not instruction manuals, just wrong. Here's why. Fix it. She assumes you'll understand, and she's almost always correct. If you don't understand, you ask, and she explains again with exactly the same patience and slightly more detail. "Why did you come here?" she asked you once, 3 months into your time here. It was late. Everyone else had gone home. You were repairing the fringe on the 2nd act costume. the long strands of gold and silver that take approximately 6 times longer to fix than anything else in the wardrobe because they tangle. To dance, you said. You still said it like that back then. To dance. Present tense. Forward-looking. Madame Arnaud looked at you for a moment. She had been doing this job for 26 years. She had seen 100 girls arrive with this answer. And I wasn't good enough for the Folies. My legs are too short. This is literally true. The Folies Bergère at this time has a height requirement and a leg length requirement and a specific proportional relationship between torso and leg that, if you don't have it, you simply don't have it. You don't have it. Did they tell you that? The woman at the audition said I should look for work in theatre that wasn't dance-based, which you interpreted as a failure, wasn't it? Madame Arnaud set down the corset she was mending and looked at you directly. Bertrand, the man who designed this building, he wanted to be an architect. He became a property agent instead. He found this building for the theatre. Without him, there would be no theatre. A pause. I wanted to be a dancer. I became a costume mistress. Every show that runs on this stage runs partly because of me, more than partly. Another pause. The question isn't whether you got the thing you wanted. The question is what you do with the thing you got. She picked up the corset again. Your hands are good, she said. Pay attention to that. She has never said anything that directly personal to you again. But you have thought about it approximately every day since. By 11 the room is operating at full capacity, which means it is too loud and too warm and too full of overlapping conversations and too full of bodies. But it is also functioning. Costumes being checked, notes from last night's performance being addressed, the specific problem of Isabelle's Act 3 headdress having listed to the right in the final number being diagnosed and resolved. The problem with Isabelle's headdress is that Isabelle has started unconsciously tilting her head left when she performs the turn sequence in Act 3, which she does because she can feel the headdress starting to list and she is pre-compensating for it, which is making it list more. You know this. Isabelle now also knows this. The solution is 2 additional anchor points on the left prong mount, which takes 14 minutes to implement and which should have been done 3 weeks ago, and which, once implemented, removes the listing entirely. You should have been a surgeon, Isabelle says while you work. Surgeons don't deal with feathers. You set the mount, test it with 2 fingers on either side of the frame, feel it sit level. Try turning. Isabelle turns. The headdress moves with her, not against her. She stops, turns again, faster. The headdress follows. Perfect, she says. Don't thank me. Tell me immediately the next time you feel something shift. You could have just said thank you, Isabelle says. I'll say thank you on closing night. For now, tell me when things shift. This is also how you work. Not unkind, but precise. Precision is the only thing that prevents problems in this room from becoming catastrophes on stage. You move on. There are 19 more costumes that need checking before the afternoon run-through. The run-through is at 2. That is 2 hours and 40 minutes from now. You have 16 costumes still to check. You do not stop moving until the run-through begins. The Théâtre du Ciel Rose holds 340 seats. The stage is 11 meters wide at the proscenium and 8 meters deep, with a fly tower that is technically capable of flying scenery to a height of 14 meters, but that has a stuck counterweight system that limits it to about 9, a fact that has influenced every production design since the summer of 1924. And that is addressed in every production meeting you have sat in the back of. with a sentence along the lines of "we're going to get that fixed" and has not yet been fixed. The house lights are up for the run-through. Without the stage lights and the darkness of the auditorium, the theatre looks like what it is. A working building with worn velvet seats and a stage floor that needs resanding and a ceiling that has a water stain in the shape, depending on who you ask, of either a duck or the boot of Italy. You are in the wings, left side, your basket at your feet. Bet is going through the Act 2 sequence with the ensemble, which means she is showing them, slowly, the 3 places where the routine breaks down when they perform it at full speed. She has the patience of someone who has been a teacher for years, which she hasn't been, she's been a dancer, but somehow the patience is there anyway. The run-through for Étoile du Ciel runs approximately 90 minutes, and identifies problems you will spend the next 2.5 hours solving before the evening performance. Today's problems. Problem 1. The sequin straps on costume 7, worn by Clémentine, have stretched. The left strap is now approximately 3 centimeters longer than the right, which causes the bodice to ride up on the left side during the can-can section, which causes the left side of the bodice to expose approximately 2 centimeters more of skin than the design intends. This doesn't sound significant. On stage, under bright light, in front of 340 people, it creates a visible asymmetry that reads as a malfunction. You restitch the strap in a tuck at the attachment point. 11 minutes. Problem 2. One of the larger headdresses, the Act 3 finale pieces, the ones that look like exploding stars and weigh the most, has a bent spoke in the wire frame. The spoke doesn't break through the outer covering, but it changes the silhouette of the piece, making one ray of the star appear shorter than the others. The girl wearing it has been trying to adjust her head position to compensate, which has given her a tension headache that has been building since the run-through began. You reshape the spoke over your knee with a pair of pliers. 4 minutes. The headache will take longer. Problem 3. The ribbon roses on the Blossom of the Night costumes. A different sequence, something with a less grandiose name, a kind of intermezzo, in which the girls wear elaborate confections of pale pink and white silk roses, covering them from shoulder to mid-thigh, are falling off. Not all of them, not catastrophically, but 3 roses have come off this week, and a 4th is hanging by 2 threads. The roses are attached with small wire staples, which is Gaston Fèvre's design, and which is exactly as sensible as it sounds when you understand that the ribbon is silk, and silk does not hold a wire staple well, and never did. You switch to small buttons and button loops on the ones that have come off, and replace the staple on the hanging one with the same. It looks identical from the front and will not come off again. Madame Arnaud watches you do this without comment. This is the highest form of approval she offers. Problem 4. Céline's understudy, the girl standing in for the sick girl, is not sick, but she has not performed this show before. She has only watched from the wings and run through the blocking twice, and her timing in the Act 2 ensemble is slightly off, in a way that doesn't disrupt the sequence, but creates a small visual stutter that Bet, watching from the house, flags by stopping the run-through and walking the understudy through the timing difference twice, 3 times, 4 times, until it locks in. The understudy is good. She is nervous, which reads in her body, but her technique covers it. She'll be fine tonight. You make a note to check her costume fitting before the show. She's slightly taller than Céline. By 4:30 you have gone through 17 specific problems and 5 maybes. things that might become problems tonight under full performance conditions but might not. And you are eating a piece of bread standing up because you haven't sat down since the croissant at 7 this morning. And there's a feeling in your legs that you've learned means eat something now before it becomes a problem later. The bread is from this morning and slightly stale. You eat it anyway. Between 5:30 and 6:30, the theatre undergoes a transformation. The work lights go off and the stage lights come on. The stage floor, which in work light shows every scratch and scuff and piece of rosin from the dancers' shoes, becomes under performance light a shining theatrical thing, something that reflects the colour of whatever gel is above it, and transforms the mundane wooden boards into a surface that looks like a place where things might actually happen. The girls start arriving for the evening performance at 5. Bet arrives first, always. She has a habit, which you've observed on every single performance night, of walking to the centre of the stage before she does anything else, standing there for approximately 30 seconds looking at the empty house, and then walking back to the dressing room. You once asked her what she was doing. "Reminding myself why," she said. You didn't ask why that needed reminding. Some things you understand without being told. The dressing room in pre-show is a different organism from the dressing room in working hours. In working hours, the room operates at a kind of contained professional energy, focused, purposeful. In pre-show, the energy is different, more volatile. It has a direction to it, building towards something, all of it pointed at 8 o'clock. The moment the house lights dim and the orchestra begins, and 340 people stop being an audience and become a single entity held in darkness, waiting. The smell changes. The working hours smell of coal smoke and thread and spirit gum is joined by the performance smells. The grease paint going on heavily now. For stage, not for practice. In quantities that make the girls look up close, slightly unreal. The powder, applied from large puffs, creating brief clouds that catch the light from the bare bulbs above the mirrors. The perfume, not Madeleine's expensive grass product, but the cheaper versions, lavender water and rose and something that smells approximately like jasmine if you don't examine it closely. And underneath all of this, something sharper, the sweat of tension. The body's specific response to performance anxiety, which smells different from ordinary sweat, more acrid, more chemical. Every performer produces it, even the ones who have been doing this for 6 years. You are moving through the room with your basket doing final checks. Run your eye over each costume on the rail. Run your hand along each hem. Check each fastening. Test each headdress mount. You're also tracking the girls, who looks tired, who is moving carefully, who is slightly pale under the grease paint. "Eat something," you say to Emile, the youngest one, who is sitting at her mirror doing her eyes with the focused intensity of someone performing surgery. "I'm not hungry." "Doesn't matter. Eat something." You put half of a bread roll on the table next to her. You brought extra. You always bring extra. She eats it without taking her eyes off the mirror. Good. You don't normally go to Madeleine's dressing room. That's Solange's domain. Solange is Madeleine's personal habilus, brought with Madeleine from her previous engagement at the Casino de Paris, and Solange guards her territory with a quiet intensity that makes clear she considers the Ciel Rose a temporary posting beneath her usual standard, and does not intend to mix more than professionally. But Madame Arnaud calls you up at 6:15. Solange has burned herself. She says this without inflection. The crimping iron. A pause. Madeleine needs her Act 2 dress for first call in 12 minutes. The buttons are wrong. Solange installed them this morning, but they're wrong. She was probably already shaking from the burn. You take your basket. You go up. Madeleine Voss's dressing room smells, as always, of that grass perfume. The room is warm. There is a separate radiator here that actually works, a detail that the chorus girls are not told and that you know only because you have been in the room. And the surfaces are covered with the evidence of a practiced and expensive personal ritual. Powders and creams in glass jars, not cardboard. A photograph tucked into the frame of the mirror, face outward. A man and a woman and 2 children in front of what might be a house in the countryside. Her family, you assume. They look nothing like the woman at the mirror. Madeleine is 42, but she looks, on stage, 28. Off stage, in this room under the bulbs, she looks 42, and tired and slightly irritable about both of these facts. She's already in the Act 2 dress, which means the problem with the buttons is immediately visible. There are 12 buttons down the back, and Solange has set them with insufficient ease at the closure, which means the fabric is pulling slightly across the shoulder blades, and the centre back seam has shifted 2 millimeters to the right. Madeleine knows something is wrong. She can feel the pull. She doesn't look at you when you come in, just reaches back with one hand and touches the centre back seam, feeling the shift. Fix it, she says. Not impolitely, not politely, just directly, which you've come to understand is simply how she communicates. There is no malice in it. She doesn't know your name. She knows Solange's name and Madame Arnaud's name, and that is the complete list of backstage names she holds in her head. But there is no malice in that either. You're simply not in the category of people whose name she keeps. You open your basket. You don't need to ask her to hold still because she is already holding still, with the absolute body control of someone who has been holding still for costume work since she was a child. You release the centre back buttons, ease the seam back to centre, repin the buttons 3 millimeters further from the edge, test the pull at the shoulders. It releases. Better, she says, without looking around. She can feel it. You reattach the buttons. Your hands are moving on their own, the way hands do when a task has been done often enough. Thread, needle, button, 4 passes through the buttonhole ring. Knot, cut. 12 buttons, 5 minutes, and 40 seconds. Madeleine stands and turns to look at the full-length mirror, examines herself. The kind of examination that is not vanity but professionalism, checking that the instrument is properly prepared. The rose on the neckline, she says, it's sitting crooked. You look. The rose is not crooked. It is at the exact angle specified in Fevre's design. You do not say this. You adjust the rose by 3 millimeters. Better, she says. You pack your basket. You're almost at the door when she speaks again. How long have you been here? You turn. She's still looking at herself in the mirror. 11 months, madame. Where from? Saint-Brieuc. A pause. She picks up a powder puff, dusts the bridge of her nose. I'm from Mulhouse, she says. Alsace. I got on a train when I was 16 with 20 francs and a hat. She doesn't say this like a life story. She says it like a fact, like she's reading from a ledger. I had exactly the same legs as your problem. She means the proportions, the reason you didn't make the chorus. I know, you say, because suddenly you do know. She has the same build as you, proportionally, and she's on every poster in Paris. How did you... I learned something I was better at. She meets your eyes in the mirror for the first time. Pay attention to what your hands can do. Then she turns away. The conversation is over. You leave. In the corridor, You stand very still for approximately 10 seconds. Then you go back to work. The Théâtre du Ciel Rose opens its doors at 7:30. You can hear the audience arriving from the dressing room, a low murmur that builds over half an hour, punctuated by the sound of the orchestra tuning in the pit, a sound that is technically chaotic, but that you have come to love, the way you might love the sound of an engine starting, because it means something is about to happen. At 5 to 8, Bette does one final check of the ensemble in the wings. She walks down the line, looking at each girl, adjusting a feather, resettling a headdress, touching a shoulder. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. The look she gives each girl is a full sentence. I see you. I know you're ready. We do this together. You're behind the wings, right side, where the Act 1 quick change station is. This is your station. A rail with the Act 1 and Act 2 costumes in order, a table with pins and thread and the tools you'll need, a small battery torch because the wings are dark and you cannot use a work light during performance. The house lights dim, the orchestra swells, and it begins. The first act of Étoile du Ciel runs 42 minutes. In those 42 minutes, you will perform 6 quick changes, 3 on the right side, 3 on the left where the other habilleuse, Céleste, is posted. The changes have been choreographed as precisely as the dancing, because they are just as choreographic in their way. Body arrives, costume goes on, body departs, all of it in a specific window of time that the show cannot exceed. Your first change is at 9 minutes. You know this not by looking at a clock. You can't see a clock from your position, but by counting. You count the musical phrases. By the time the third solo verse of the opening number begins, you're at your station, the first change costume in your hands, held open at the right angle for the girl to step into it. The girl is Victoire. She runs to you from the wings at the exact moment the third verse begins. She's already stepping out of the Act 1 opening costume before she reaches you. Experienced girls do this. They start undressing in the last 2 bars of the song, and she hits your position with the base garment already off, just the corset remaining. 12 seconds. That's the window. You hold the costume. She steps in. Your fingers find the hooks without looking. All 22 of them. Your hands moving from bottom to top. Hook, eye, hook, eye, hook, eye. The fabric smoothing itself as you go. At hook 18 you feel a slight catch. You work it past. Hook 19, 20, 21, 22. You step back. Victoire smooths the skirt with both hands. Front, right side, left side, back. She does it without looking, feeling for the drape. You place the headdress, the prong seat, the frame levels. Victoire is gone, back through the wing opening, into the light. 9 seconds. You have beaten your time by 3 seconds. You don't celebrate this. You reset the station, open costume, place tools, check torch, and start counting again for the next one. The next change is Clémentine at 14 minutes, straightforward, then Isabelle at 22 minutes. The headdress you fixed this morning seats perfectly, and you feel a small private satisfaction about this. Then a gap, nothing on your side from 22 to 38. You use the gap to check the Act 2 rack, to reset, to eat 2 bites of the bread roll you have in your basket, standing, not putting it down, eating the way the girls eat backstage, quickly, functionally, the way you'd fuel an engine. At 38 minutes, Victoire again. A different change. The Act 1 finale costume. This one has 31 hooks, the most complex fastening in the show. Your record for 31 hooks is 23 seconds. Tonight you do it in 21. This is the small, invisible sport of your work, the times. Nobody else knows about them. Nobody else is keeping score. But you know, and the knowing drives your hands faster, your fingers more precise. At 41 minutes, 1 minute before the act break, there is a pause in your counts where there should be no pause. The wing entrance is empty. Someone is not where they should be. You step to the wing edge. In the darkness, you can see the stage. All 12 girls in the finale formation. All 12 should be there. You count 11. A sound to your left. Movement. You turn. It's Emile, the youngest girl. She's standing 3 meters back from the wing entrance, pressed against the flat of the wing itself, and she is shaking. Her chest is moving too fast. Her eyes are too wide. Stage fright. Acute. Right now, with 1 minute to the end of Act 1, in the middle of the finale number she should be performing. You move to her. You don't think about it. Your hands go to her shoulders, light, grounding. Look at me, you say. Quiet, direct. She looks at you. You're not going to faint. Your legs work. I know this because you ran through that sequence 12 times this afternoon and your legs worked every time. I can't. Your legs work, you say again. The rest of you doesn't matter right now, just the legs. On stage, the music is building to the finale. 20 seconds, you say. That's the entrance. I'm going to walk you there. You keep your hands on her shoulders. You walk her to the wing entrance. She's still shaking, but she's moving. Go. She goes. She hits her mark exactly as the finale chord lands. From the front of the house, unless you know what you're looking at, she looks like every other girl. Radiant, present, smiling. The curtain comes down. Act 1 over. You release a breath you've been holding for approximately 45 seconds and start resetting the station for Act 2. The interval lasts 20 minutes. From the front of the house, the interval at the Ciel Rose is pleasant. The bar does good business. The audience drinks champagne, the good kind, the kind that comes with the ticket price built in, because Monsieur Beaumont is genuinely knowledgeable about champagne, even if he is less knowledgeable about other things. And they talk about the show, and the costumes, and Madeleine's voice, which is genuinely extraordinary. A light soprano with a particular quality in the upper register that does something slightly unusual to the air in the theatre. From the backstage side, the interval is a concentrated and slightly chaotic 20 minutes of repair work. Victoire's Act 1 finale costume has shed 3 sequins from the right cuff, which means the net backing there is fragile and will shed more during Act 2 if not reinforced. You reinforce it with a quick pass of clear thread over the backing in the 3 bald spots. Emile's headdress, prong on the right side, has loosened. You notice it before she does, when you take the headdress for storage during the interval, because the wobble is slight enough that she may not have felt it. You tighten the mounting from inside the frame while Emile drinks water and tries to slow her heart rate. You are good, you tell her, which is not precisely true. She was functional, which given the circumstances is better than good. But she needs to hear good, and good is not an inaccurate description of the result. She nods. She's still slightly pale under the makeup. The shaking, she says. Does it go away? You think about Bet, who's been performing for 6 years and still does 30 seconds at centre stage before every show. It changes, you say. It doesn't go away, but it changes into something you can use. Emile considers this. That's not as reassuring as it sounds, she says. It's not supposed to be reassuring, it's supposed to be true. She almost smiles. You're very strange for a dresser. You're very honest for a dancer. This time she does smile. You take the headdress back to the rack. Hang it at the correct angle. Move to the next item on your checklist. Madame Arnaud appears at your elbow. The Act 2 fringe on 7. She doesn't need to say more. You've both been watching it. You pull costume 7 from the Act 2 rail and examine the fringe. 3 strands have become entangled with adjacent strands in a way that will, under stage lighting, read as a snarl rather than a cascade. You take the comb from your basket, a wide-toothed metal comb, not plastic, because plastic cracks under tension, and a cracked comb in the dark is a hazard, and work the strands apart with a patience that has been acquired rather than natural. Who taught you the comb technique? Madame Arnaud asks. You did. A pause. I taught you the rough version. Someone else taught you the rest. A seamstress in Lyon before I came here. She made theatrical costumes. What was her name? Madame Villeneuve. Madame Arnaud is quiet for a moment. I trained with a woman by that name in Lyon, long before you were born. She looks at the fringe work you're doing. She was good. Yes. So are you. This is, from Madame Arnaud, a statement of such unusual directness that you have no immediate response to it. You keep working on the fringe. She said the same thing about my hands that you did, you say finally. Then you should listen. Madame Arnaud takes the costume from you, examines your work, hands it back. The fringe is fine. Get the Act 2 rack in order. The interval bell rings. 10 minutes. You move. Act 2 of Étoile du Ciel opens with the number that gives the show its name. 12 girls, the full company of the Midnight Sky costume, entering from both wings simultaneously to a piece of music that the conductor, a meticulous Bulgarian man named Petrov, who has worked in Paris cabarets for 15 years, and who takes the artistic merit of popular entertainment with absolute seriousness, has shaped into something that builds from near silence to a sound large enough to fill the theatre. The costumes in Act 2 are heavier, the headdresses are larger, the choreography is more demanding, the quick changes are tighter, you are at your station, counting. At 4 minutes into Act 2, your side has its first change. At 6 minutes, the second. At 11, the third. This one involves the largest headdress, the Act 2 star crown, the one that weighs 4 kilograms and 500 grams, and that seats on 4 prongs, and that you have fit and refit and adjusted and reinforced across the 11 months of your time here, and that tonight, on the 11th change of the evening, you place onto the head of the girl, Thérèse, who wears it. At 13 minutes, Thérèse is in the wing, returning from the stage for a brief costume augmentation, a cloak that goes over the Act 2 costume for the following sequence. And she turns to you, and something in her face stops you. My neck, she says. Just those 2 words. But the way she says them, you step to her. She's holding herself very still. The headdress is correctly mounted. You can see that. But her neck is rigid, not with performance tension, but with something else. The muscles on the left side below the ear are visibly contracted. Since when? 20 minutes. It started building during Act 1. You should have. I know. She should have told you at the interval, but she didn't, because what would that have changed? The show was running. The headdress needed to be worn. You would have said the same things you're saying now, and the result would have been the same. When you go back on, tilt your chin down 2 degrees, just 2. It'll take the load off the left attachment point. I've been trying to hold it level. Don't hold it level. 2 degrees down, let the frame balance itself. You demonstrate on yourself slightly the angle of head that distributes the weight more evenly across all 4 prongs. The audiences won't see 2 degrees. What about Monsieur Beaumont? Let me worry about Monsieur Beaumont. Thérèse looks at you. She trusts you. Not because of anything formal, not because of any official hierarchy. Because you have been right enough times in situations like this that the trust has built itself out of those repeated instances of being right. She goes back on stage. She holds her head at 2 degrees down. At the interval after the sequence when she comes off, the muscle contraction has eased, not gone. It needs ice and rest and probably 24 hours before it's fully resolved, but eased enough to get through the rest of the show. Better, you ask? Better? Ice tonight, before sleep. Yes, mother. I'm not your mother. I'm the person who prevents catastrophes. Ice tonight. At 35 minutes into Act 2, the crisis comes. Not from the costumes, not from the headdresses or the hooks or the sequins or any of the things you've been managing all night with the proficiency of someone who has mapped every possible failure in this system. It comes from a sound in the orchestra, specifically a wrong note. The pianist who provides the harmonic foundation for the Act 2 centerpiece, the slow, dreaming number where Madeleine comes down stage and sings, the whole company posed behind her, that if you watch it from the house makes the theatre feel like it's holding its breath. The pianist plays a chord that is incorrect, and this incorrect chord registers with Madeleine in the exact moment she is moving into her entrance, and she pauses. It is a very small pause, maybe 2 beats, maybe less. From the front of the house, most of the audience does not notice. Bet, watching from the far wing, notices. You, watching from your wing, notice. And Madeleine, on stage, with the whole theatre waiting, has to make a choice. Continue with the music as it is, which means the chord is resolved into the correct key in the next bar anyway, or stop. She continues. Her voice, when it comes, fills the theatre with exactly the quality that makes her name on the posters worth the cost of the type. The moment passes, the show continues, but in the wing Bet has gone very still, and afterward, when you are all in the dressing room and the show is over and the girls are removing their makeup and the adrenaline is coming down, Bet says, quietly to no one in particular, the pianist. And everyone in the room knows what that means. It means the pianist's unreliability is now a documented problem. It means it will be discussed. It means there will be consequences. And it means that tonight, at the exact wrong moment, someone let something slip that could have unravelled everything. The show held. This time. It always holds, until the night it doesn't. The final curtain falls at 10:40. The dressing room after the show is a different animal from every previous version of the dressing room. The tension of performance releases all at once, and what remains is something between exhaustion and euphoria. Not joy exactly, not relief exactly, but the specific and unrepeatable feeling of having done the thing, gotten to the other side, survived the night. Girls sit at their mirrors removing makeup with cold cream and cloths, talking across each other about the show, about the performance, about the thing that went wrong and didn't break anything, and the thing that went right when it shouldn't have. Costume 7's fringe held. Isabel's headdress held. Emile made her entrance. Madeleine has already left through the private exit that connects to the street via a corridor that bypasses the stage door entirely. This is one of the contracted requirements of her engagement, access to the private exit. She does not stand at the stage door and greet admirers. Everyone else does, or some version of it. The stage door of the Ciel Rose is on the Rue Lepic side, and by the time you're packing your basket and checking the costume rail for tomorrow, there are men outside it. You can hear them from the dressing room window, which is above street level, so you can see them if you lean out. A loose cluster of 10 or 12 men in various states of evening dress, most of them carrying flowers or bottles or small packages, all of them waiting with the specific patience of people who know they are waiting for something they want. Some of these men are harmless. They are, in the most literal sense, admirers. They come to the show, they admire the girls, they wait at the stage door to say so. A bouquet, a compliment, a moment of contact with the thing they've been watching from the darkness. Some of them are regulars, some of them are genuinely kind, some of them are something else. You know these something else's by sight now, the particular quality of their waiting, the way they scan the girls leaving rather than greeting them, the way they look at the packages they're carrying, not like someone holding a gift, but like someone holding an investment. There are arrangements that happen at stage doors, and have always happened at stage doors, and the economic structure of the chorus, 12 to 18 francs a week, creates the conditions for those arrangements with a logic that is as straightforward and as brutal as any other economic logic. This is the fourth rule of the room. You do not discuss this. You do not judge it. You do not pretend it doesn't exist. You do note sometimes the girls who leave through the stage door with someone specific, and you track whether they come in the next morning looking tired or looking hurt, and you adjust your approach accordingly. This is not your responsibility. But it has become a kind of informal watching that you do, because nobody else is doing it, and because Madame Arnaud, who has been doing this job for 26 years, and who has seen everything twice, does the same thing. Tonight, Victoire leaves with a man in a grey coat. He's been at the door 3 nights this week. He brings good chocolates and he waits patiently and he doesn't grab anyone's arm. Victoire decides herself. This is her decision. She looks relaxed when she leaves. Emile leaves with 2 other girls from the ensemble heading to a café en Pigalle, and she glances back at you from the door and gives you a small nod that means something, but you're not entirely sure what. You leave after everyone else, the last one out as always. Your basket is packed, the costume rail is covered, the stove is banked, the stage door clicks shut behind you. It is 11:15. The streets of Montmartre in October at 11:15 are not the streets of a city preparing for sleep. You know this. You know these streets. The Rue Lepic runs down from the butte in a long curve, and the upper part of it, near the theatre, near the Moulin de la Galette, which is still there, still turning its sails, though it stopped grinding grain a long time ago, and is now a dance hall, because everything in Montmartre eventually becomes a dance hall, is lined with the particular combination of establishments that characterize this part of the city at this hour. Brasseries with their windows steamed and their lights yellow and warm, the smell of onion soup and pipe tobacco coming through the doors when they open. The tabacs with their hanging strings of sausages and their proprietors who have been up since 5:30 and will be up again at 5:30 tomorrow, and who greet the late-night theatre crowd with the patience of people who have made their peace with human rhythms. The small restaurants where no tourist would think to eat, and where the food is therefore good and honest, and costs 1/3 of what it costs on the Boulevard de Clichy. The wide street at the bottom of the hill, that is where the tourists go, and where the establishments exist to extract money from people who don't know better. The Boulevard de Clichy at 11:15 is another world. You cross it sometimes on your way home, and the contrast with the streets above is always striking. The big cabarets, the Moulin Rouge, the Bal Tabarin, the ones with the names and the large signs, and the tout outside who calls to passing couples in English and German and sometimes Russian, are in full operation. The carriages and the early motor cars that have started appearing on these streets are lined up outside. The patrons inside are the people from the posters, the elegant men, the beautiful women, the champagne, the gaslight, the magic. The magic is real in its way. The performance up there, the can-can, the feathers, the girls who are better paid and more heavily recruited, and who have the measurements that qualify them for the larger stages. That performance is real. What it costs to produce it is also real, and the cost is not visible from the front of the house. You cross the boulevard without looking in. You've been inside the large cabarets only twice, and both times as a visitor, not a worker, and the impression they left was of extraordinary scale and noise and light, and the smell of money in the particular form it takes when large numbers of people are spending it on sensation. You turned left at the corner and walked home. Tonight you turn left. The Rue des Abbesses is 10 minutes from the theatre, uphill slightly, the cobblestones uneven in the dark. You have a small lamp, a battery lamp, the kind the electricity companies are selling now, much more practical than a candle, and it throws a circle of steady white light around your feet. The street is quiet here. Up one flight, a window lights up briefly, then goes dark. A cat runs across the road ahead of you, stops in the circle of your lamp, looks at you with the flat certainty of a thing that has decided you are not dangerous, and walks on. You pass the bakery, shut, dark, but already beginning to smell of the next day's preparation. The warmth of the oven seeping through the shuttered door, a smell of yeast and wheat. That is the most comforting smell in this city, because it means the morning exists. The morning is already being prepared. The world is turning. You're tired in your body in the specific way that comes from a full day of this work. Your hands ache at the knuckles. The cold does this, and the constant gripping and releasing of tools and fabric. Your right shoulder is tight where the basket strap sits. Your feet are not dancing feet. They are not destroyed the way the performer's feet are destroyed, but they have spent 12 hours on stone and wooden floors, and they know it. You are also not ready to sleep. This is the paradox of the work. You are physically exhausted and mentally alert, because the mental alertness is what the work runs on, and it doesn't turn off when your body stops moving. You're still running checks, still noting things. The hook that needs to be replaced on costume 15, the beeswax mixture running low, the understudy who will need a full fitting tomorrow if Céline is still ill. The lists run. You have learned to let them run. They are part of the work, which is to say they are part of you now, and fighting them is less useful than simply letting them complete themselves before sleep. The door to your building on the Rue des Abbesses, the lock slightly sticky that responds to a half turn before the full turn. Up 2 flights, the wooden stairs that creak in a sequence you know by heart. 2nd stair, 5th stair, the top stair, which actually sounds like a question mark if you hit it right. A rising inflection. The door to your room. Sylvia's asleep, her breathing steady and slow from the other side of the curtain that divides the room into its approximate 2 halves. A curtain made from a length of heavy curtain fabric that you found at the market 2 months ago, and that Sylvie sewed the rings on while you sewed the hem. A 20-minute domestic achievement that you were both absurdly pleased about. You set down the basket, peel off your coat, sit on the edge of the bed. Your hands in the lamplight, still. The knuckles reddened from the cold, the fingertips roughened. You think of Madame Arnaud's hands, her cracked knuckles, the cut that won't close, the hands of someone who has done this work for 26 years. You think of what she said today, what Madeleine said, what they both said, in different words, about the same thing. The lamp casts a small circle of light on the wall. Outside, Montmartre continues. The brasseries, the dance halls, the voices of people passing below. The city, as always, not sleeping. You lie down. After that first week, the months move. Not quickly. They don't move quickly. Nothing about this work is quick in the way time is quick on good holidays, in the way a good afternoon in the sun moves. But they move with a rhythm, and the rhythm becomes yours. And the becoming yours is how time passes in a life built around repetition. You come to know the seasons of the theatre the way you imagine a farmer knows the seasons of a field, not as abstract categories, summer, autumn, winter, spring, but as a set of specific conditions that require specific responses. Autumn is the opening. New show, new costumes, new problems. The girls arrive back from their summer various. Wherever they go, whoever they go to, the summer is the off-season and everyone disperses, and the dressing room reassembles itself like a piece of furniture being rebuilt after moving. Same pieces, slightly changed relationships. Who has eaten well over the summer and who hasn't, which you can see in how the costumes fit. Who has a new man, a new injury, a new determination, a new despair. Autumn is also cold. The coal stove in the dressing room and the inadequate radiator in Madeleine's room and the rest of the theatre, which has a heating system that dates from the building's construction and that produces warmth in the manner of someone making an extremely cautious promise. It might, under certain conditions, with patience. The girls wrap their feet in scarves during breaks, which then have to be removed quickly enough to not delay costume changes, and you factor this into your timing. November, December. The Christmas season, which is the busy season, the full house season, 3 performances a week becoming 5. The holiday traffic filling the front of the house with people who are happy to be there in the specific way people are happy when they've made a deliberate decision to be festive and are investing heavily in the festiveness holding. Good audiences, generous. Christmas itself. The theatre closes for 4 days. You spend 3 of them in your room, sleeping more than you have since you arrived in Paris, and 1 of them on a train to Saint-Brieuc, where you see your mother, who has aged slightly since the last time. Has she always had that grey at the temple? And your father, who asks when you're coming home, and your brother who doesn't ask, who looks at you with something that might be envy and might be relief, and who tells you without saying it directly that Saint-Brieuc has not changed. It hasn't. The streets are the same, the harbour, the smell of the sea, which you had forgotten you missed, the kitchen table where you ate every meal until you were 18. On the 4th day, you take the train back to Paris. You're not surprised to find that you're relieved to be going back. You note this. It means something, though you're not sure what. January. The cold that makes November's cold look like early autumn. The Seine freezes in parts, which hasn't happened in years and which becomes its own spectacle. People walking down to look at it. The river reduced to a slow grey movement between frozen edges. The theatre pipes freeze twice, and both times there is a day without running water backstage, which creates specific and interesting logistical problems involving makeup removal and hygiene that everyone solves with the pragmatic resourcefulness of people who have solved larger problems with fewer resources. February, the new show. Rêve de printemps. Spring dreams, which is a deliberate act of seasonal optimism in the deepest part of winter. New costumes, new problems, different problems. Fèvre is back with a new design that involves a sleeve construction that is technically beautiful and practically monstrous. A layered chiffon cascade that requires 3 separate fastenings and that takes 12 seconds to attach and 16 to remove, which means the quick changes have to be retimed, which means 3 days of careful renegotiation of the choreographic schedule, which involves Bette and Madame Arnaud and the choreographer and Monsieur Beaumont in a meeting that you are not in but whose outcome you implement. Spring. Longer light. The girls arrive in better spirits generally, or with spirits that are more legible. Winter coats conceal more than cold. The stage door crowd changes composition as the tourist season begins. More foreigners, more English and American voices in the mix, the Americans particularly. Paris in the 20s is receiving American visitors in numbers nobody anticipated. People who have come because the exchange rate makes Paris cheap for dollars, and because the Americans have been told by every artist and writer of their generation that Paris is where the real life is, and some of them believe it sincerely and come for the experience, and some of them use it as a coat to wear for the fundamental fact that they want to drink legally, because America has outlawed alcohol and Paris has not. You serve in your way all of these audiences. They sit in the house and they see the show, and the show contains things you have held in your hands, the feathers you have cleaned and recurled, the sequins you have sewn back on, the headdresses you have mounted and adjusted and carried and cared for. They don't know this. They're not supposed to know this. That's the job. Your second year. Madame Arnaud begins asking your opinion on fittings. Not deferring to it. She has not started deferring to anyone in 27 years and doesn't start now. But asking. As a second perspective. The way a surgeon might ask the opinion of a colleague on a case that has a complication. You give your opinion. She considers it. Sometimes she agrees. Sometimes she explains why you're wrong. Either way, you learn more in those exchanges than you would in a year of instruction. Bette asks you, in March of the second year, to help her remount a costume that has a structural problem at the waist. A seam that keeps breaking under the strain of the can-can kick, which requires the seam to open to a specific angle without tearing, and which has been resewn 12 times since the show opened by various hands including yours, and which keeps failing. You look at the seam. You look at where it keeps failing. Always the same point, 2 centimeters from the left side insertion. The strain isn't from the seam, you say. It's from here. You point to the waistband, to a specific point where the bone has been inserted at a slightly incorrect angle. The bone is torquing when you kick. It rotates maybe 2 degrees, and that 2 degrees pulls the seam from inside. Bette looks at you. That would take 20 minutes to fix. 15, if the bone comes out easily. It comes out in 11 minutes. You reinsert it at the correct angle. Bette kicks, full extension, the seam holds. Bette doesn't say anything. She looks at the seam, and then at you, and then back at the seam. How did you know that? Madame Arnaud showed me the principle. A different costume. The mechanic is the same. Bette nods slowly. You should ask Beaumont for a raise. I have asked Beaumont for a raise. Ask him again. It didn't work the first time. Ask him in front of Madame Arnaud. You consider this. You ask Beaumont again, in front of Madame Arnaud, 2 weeks later. He sighs with enthusiasm of a man who finds sighing cathartic. He adjusts your wages by 3 francs. 3 francs. It is not much. It is something. You mark it down in your ledger. You have started keeping a ledger, because Madame Arnaud keeps a ledger, because the precision that works on costumes works on everything. And you continue. Your third year. Josette came back, as it turned out, 2 months after the night she left with a man in the good coat. She came back different, quieter, and she was given back her position without comment, because Bette made it clear that this was what was happening, and Monsieur Beaumont, who was not entirely without human intelligence, understood that this was what was happening and agreed. The girl who'd been filling the spot, a girl from the waiting list, from Bordeaux, with good technique and a pragmatic personality, was given a position in the second row, which is a real position and not a courtesy, and she took it without complaint. The room absorbs things. It has absorbed things for as long as it has existed. The room is one of the most absorbing places you know. Céline recovered from whatever her chest problem was. It took 6 weeks and it left her with a cough that surfaces in cold weather. She never misses a performance. Émile, the youngest girl, the one who froze in the wings on your first show together, is now in the 3rd year of her contract and teaches the new girls the Act 2 sequence. You watch her do this from across the room sometimes. She's patient in the way Bette is patient, the way good teachers are patient. Her timing is perfect. The pianist who played the wrong chord was replaced. His replacement is a Hungarian man named Tibor, who has a permanent expression of mild alarm that is, as far as you can determine, simply his face, and who plays with a precision that produces no wrong chords and also no spontaneous warmth, which creates its own problems, which are at least more interesting problems than wrong notes. There are things the job teaches you that you didn't expect to learn. The first is bodies, not in any theoretical or artistic sense, but in the mechanical, functional, constantly in progress of being maintained sense. You know the bodies of 24 women with the specificity that is purely professional and that is also intimate in its way. Not personal intimate, but contact intimate. The intimacy of hands on a back every night, fingers on a neck adjusting a prong. You know which ones have old injuries that affect their movement. Clementine's left ankle, broken in a fall 4 years ago, and healed slightly wrong, which means she favours it in jump sequences and you can see it in the right side of her costume, which takes slightly more strain on that side. Victoire's lower back, which tightens in cold weather, and which you address with a slight modification to how you lace her Act 2 corset. Thérèse's neck, which has been a recurring issue since the heavy headdress season. You have become, without intending to, a kind of informal caretaker of these bodies. Not their doctor, not their trainer, but the person who stands at the intersection between their bodies and the things they wear, and who manages that intersection with precision. The second thing the job teaches you is systems. A show is a system. Every performance is the same system running again, and every time it runs there are variables. A girl slightly tired, a seam slightly weaker, a headdress mount slightly shifted from the performance before, and the job is to manage those variables close enough to zero that the system continues to run. You have become very good at spotting the variables before they become problems. Your pattern recognition for costume failure has gotten sharp enough that Madame Arnaud now sends you to do the pre-show check alone, without her supervision. "You don't need me looking over your shoulder," she said, on a Tuesday in October of the 2nd year. "You know what to look for." This was the closest she has come since the night she told you about your hands, to saying something like, "You are good at this." It was enough. The third thing is the specific quality of exhaustion this work produces and how to live with it. You've been tired since you arrived in Paris. Not tired the way you were tired after a day in the fields, or tired the way you were tired after the long train journey from Saint-Brieuc. A different tired. The tired of sustained and precise use of a specific set of abilities day after day in the context of something that matters. Because it matters, the show matters, the girls matter, and you take what matters to you seriously. You have learned to sleep efficiently, to eat efficiently, to find the brief pockets of stillness. 5 minutes on the coal scuttle behind the left wing flat between Act 1 and Act 2, or the 20 minutes between the show, and the full costume down when the girls are removing their own makeup and your hands can rest. And to use them completely. You are also happy. This is a strange thing to recognize, and you recognize it only gradually. The way you would recognize that the light has been changing for an hour without your noticing. You're happy in this work, not every moment of it. There are moments of frustration and exhaustion, and the particular low feeling that comes at 2 a.m. when you're resewing a seam that has failed for the 3rd time on the same spot, and you haven't eaten since 3 p.m. But the shape of the life fits the shape of something in you that you couldn't have named before you found it. You came here to dance. You're here to do something else. Both things are true. On a Sunday in September, your 3rd year, Bet proposes a walk. This is unusual. Bet does not propose social activities. She organises professional ones. The walk is proposed on a Sunday morning when the theatre is closed, and it is proposed with the same directness she brings to everything. Come, she says at the door of your room. I want to go up the butte. The butte is the hill, the actual hill of Montmartre, the highest point in Paris, which you have been walking around the bottom of for 3 years, and up which you have gone perhaps 4 times, always for a specific reason, never simply to go. You go with her. It is September, early morning, and the light is doing what Paris light does in September. The quality it has in autumn mornings before the cloud cover sets in. A horizontal light that comes from the east at an angle low enough to illuminate the undersides of things, to show the city at a depth that noon never achieves. The streets in this light look like they're being revealed, like someone is turning up a lamp that has been turned too low. The butte rises steeply and you climb the steps. There are steps, long flights of white stone steps winding up the hill, and below you Paris expands with each flight, and Bet climbs without talking, which is fine. You have learned that Bet's silences are not empty. At the top, the white dome of Sacré-Cœur. They have been building this church for 50 years. It is still not entirely finished in 1926, in the sense that there are scaffolding elements on the south side and some of the interior stonework is incomplete. But the dome is finished and the facade is finished, and it is there, white against the September sky, on the highest point of Paris, visible from nearly everywhere in the city. You have been looking at it from below for 3 years. You have not been here at the top. The church itself, the stone is travertine limestone quarried in the Côte d'Or, and it has a property of hardening and bleaching in rain. So the building has been getting whiter since its construction began in 1875, a slow process of purification by weather. It gleams in the morning light. From this angle, from this distance, up close, the sheer scale of it is different from how it reads from the street. Not just large, but very large, its proportions designed for impression, for the specific feeling of smallness in the viewer that Gothic and Neo-Byzantine architecture both produce. You stand with Bet in the esplanade and look at it. Neither of you speaks. Then you turn and look south. Paris from here, the whole city, the Seine first. The river carves through the middle distance, not blue or brown or grey, but a kind of pewter, catching the morning light in silver stripes where it curves. You can see the Ile de la Cité, the original island, the centre of the original city, with its spine of stone, Notre Dame at the east end. Beyond it, the left bank, the right bank, rooftops, the particular geometry of Haussmann's renovation, the wide boulevards cutting diagonals through the older irregular streets. The Eiffel Tower, built for the 1889 exposition and still there, 40 years later, which was never the plan, it was supposed to be dismantled, and which has become the thing everyone thinks of when they think of Paris, even though at the time it was built, many Parisians thought it was hideous. Smoke from 100,000 chimneys rising in the still morning air and spreading into a thin layer of haze that sits above the city like a held breath. And further, at the edges of your sight, the curve of the horizon, the outer arrondissements, the suburbs, the fields beginning, the country that is the origin of every one of the people in this city, the people who came from Saint-Brieuc and Mulhouse and Bordeaux and Lyon, and the villages whose names don't appear on the maps in the railway stations. All of them here. All of this contained in the curve of the valley below you. I come here when something's wrong, Bet says. What's wrong? Nothing, right now. A pause. I come here to remember that it's the right city. She's looking at the rooftops, the spires, the glittering river. When it's bad, when Beaumont is insane, or the show is bad, or I've been dancing through something I shouldn't have danced through, I come here and look at it and it's still the right city. It didn't change. I'm still here. That's usually what I needed to know. You stand with her. The light is moving, the September light travelling its low path, and below you the city is waking, smoke rising thicker now, windows opening, the faint sound of carts on stone reaching you even up here. What are you going to do next? Bet asks. The question comes without preamble, which is Bet's way. I don't know, you say. What comes after this? After what? This show? This theatre? This. Bet is quiet for a moment. She's 31 years old and has been a dancer in the city for 13 years. And the question of what comes after is not an abstract question for someone 31 years old in a career that places heavy demands on a body that will not forever be 31. There's a woman, she says, who teaches dance at a school on the Rue du Conservatoire. She was in the chorus 20 years ago. Now she teaches. A pause. There's Madame Arnaud. There's Madame Arnaud, you agree. She'll retire someday. She'll never retire. Bet almost laughs. Probably not. But someone has to know what she knows. She's been trying to write it down for 6 years and she keeps stopping because there's always something that needs doing. She looks at you. You should write it down with her. She would never. She hasn't decided not to, and she hasn't decided yes either. She hasn't been asked in the right way. A pause. Ask her. Below you, Paris continues. It is not waiting for any decision you make. It is simply continuing in the way it has been continuing since before either of you was born and will continue after you are gone. The river running between its banks, the light changing, the smoke rising from 100,000 fires. You stand there for a long time. Then Bet says, we should go back. I have a rehearsal note from Thursday that I haven't addressed. The timing in the second sequence? The timing in the second sequence. She turns from the view. It's always the timing. You go back down the steps. The city rises to meet you as you descend. 4 years in, this is what you know. You know the smell of the dressing room in every season, in every configuration. The winter smell with the stove running full, the coal fumes and the warmth and the women. The summer smell, which is the same base but with the windows open. The occasional waft of the street mixing in, and the smell of the sun on the costumes after you've aired them in the back corridor on Monday mornings. You know the weight of the large headdresses by costume number. Number 1, the sunrise piece, 3 kilograms, 200 grams. Number 2, the star crown, 4 kilograms, 500 grams. Number 3, the midnight moon, which is the heaviest, the one that gave Therese the neck problem in the first season, 4 kilograms, 900 grams. You know these weights the way you know the weight of your basket. You know the timing of every change in every show the Ciel Rose has run in the past 4 years. Not the seconds. Those shift with the specific performers and the specific configuration, but the structure of them, the architecture of the quick change sequences, the places where the design creates unavoidable stress, and the places where it offers grace. You know Madame Arnaud's hands better than you know most people's faces. The state of the knuckles tells you what the workload has been. The specific cut on the right index finger healed 2 months ago. Cleanly this. Time, because you brought her a tube of medical-grade zinc cream from the pharmacy on Pigalle and didn't give her a choice about using it. You know what Bette looks like when her ankle is worse than she's saying. You know what Emile looks like when she's been crying before rehearsal and covered it well. You know what Victoire looks like when she's considering leaving the chorus, which she has considered twice and both times decided against. And each time the consideration announced itself in a specific quality of stillness she takes on at the mirror. A looking at herself that is different from the usual professional assessment. These are not things you were taught. They were given to you by years of proximity and attention, which is, come to think of it, the only way most things worth knowing get given. You've also started writing things down, not at Madame Arnaud's direction. She didn't agree to that directly, but she didn't disagree to it, which you have come to understand is her form of agreement, but in a small notebook, a cahier, the cheap kind with the speckled black and white cover that students use. The notebook contains, at present, a diagram of every costume mount system the Ciel Rose has used in the past 2 years, with notes on failure points and solutions, a record of the spirit gum recipe and its seasonal variations, the method for recurling ostrich feathers without damaging the barbs, which you learned from Madame Arnaud, and which she learned from her predecessor. The specific thread tensions for silk versus cotton versus wool in cold weather versus warm weather. It is, you have started to understand, a document. Not finished? It won't be finished for years, if it's ever finished. But a document of things that work and why they work, in a discipline where most of the knowledge lives in people's hands and disappears when those people leave. You think about the seamstresses on the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Martin, sewing sequins onto backing nets, 3 stitches per sequin. You think about whether anyone has written down their methods, their solutions, the things they have learned. You suspect not. You suspect most of what they know will leave with them, the way Madame Arnaud's predecessor's knowledge mostly left with her, except for the fraction that Madame Arnaud absorbed in time. You write faster. The closing night of the 4th season of the Théâtre du Ciel Rose runs on the 22nd of December, 1929. It is a different city from the city you arrived in. The crash has happened. In October, the thing that people in the financial newspapers had been calling, in retrospect, inevitable, happened. The American stock markets collapsed in a series of days that were afterward described with the vocabulary of natural disasters: Black Thursday, Black Monday, Black Tuesday. The crash travelled across the ocean and arrived in Paris in weeks, the way a ship delivers cargo. The jazz is still playing, the shows are still running, the champagne is still being poured in the front of house. But the quantities have shifted. There are fewer seats sold. Some of the men who used to wait at the stage door with packages have stopped coming. 2 of the specialty acts did not return from the summer break because the engagements they were relying on didn't materialize. And Monsieur Beaumont in November called a meeting. You were not in the meeting. You were outside it, in the corridor, which has good acoustics, and what you heard was a discussion of budget that had the quality of all budget discussions when the budget is not sufficient. A careful and slightly panicked inventory of which things were essential and which things were, in the technical term, coupable, cuttable. The word staff reduction appeared in the portion of the meeting you could hear. You went back to the dressing room and finished the hem you were working on. The meeting resulted in, so far as you could reconstruct from its aftermath, 3 of the 12 chorus positions being eliminated for the spring season, which means 3 girls whose contracts would not be renewed. 2 of the specialty acts replaced with less expensive ones, and the costume budget reduced by 40%, which you, Madame Arnaud and Bette discussed for 3 hours after the meeting, and determined could be managed with specific and significant changes to the approach to new production design. You wrote the analysis. Madame Arnaud reviewed it. Bette presented it to Beaumont. He agreed. He said he would never have thought of 2 of the 3 approaches. Madame Arnaud said afterward, he wouldn't. He doesn't think about the right things. This is one of the most direct criticisms she has ever made of anyone. The closing night of the 4th season, full house, because closing nights fill themselves through a kind of theatrical osmosis. People feel them approaching and buy tickets. The performance runs well, the timing is good. Tibor the pianist does not play a wrong note. Madeleine's voice in the 2nd act does the thing with the air again, that particular quality in the upper register. The curtain call goes long. 3 additional curtains. The audience is generous, the way December audiences are generous, the way people spending an evening at a beautiful show in December are generous, which is to say, abundantly, with the specific warmth of people who know they're saying goodbye to something, even if they don't fully know what. You are in the wing for the curtain calls, as always. You watch Bette take the company bow, her face in the bright light doing exactly what a performer's face does in that moment. Something that is both genuine and performed, which is not a contradiction, which is in fact the definition of the best performance, the thing that cannot be faked and cannot be held back, the thing that comes out when a body that has been doing this long enough finally stands in the lights in front of all those people who have given over their evening to watch. You think, I have been here for 4 years. I have watched this woman in this moment, in different costumes, in different productions, dozens of times. I have never been tired of it. The curtain comes down the final time, and the room, the dressing room, the 35 square meters of costume number 3 and hooks and eyes and cold smoke and cold cream and all of it, fills with the sound of 20 women finishing a season. The sound of it. Laughter and talking over each other and one girl crying. not from sadness, but from the accumulated pressure of 4 months releasing all at once, and someone opening a bottle of wine, the cheap kind, the passed hand-to-hand kind, and the cork hitting the ceiling of the room. You drink your portion from the bottle. You're warm enough, fed enough, part of enough. You put down the bottle and pick up your basket. You start the post-show check. Outside, the Rue Lepic in December at midnight, and Paris has done what it does in December, which is to say, it has put lights in windows and in the bare branches of the plane trees on the wide streets, and the lights and the cold together create a quality of air that is both bitter and festive, both cutting and warm, which is the whole contradiction of winter cities laid out for your inspection. You walk, your basket is lighter than usual. The end of the season means most of the heavy equipment goes into storage and you strip down to the minimum for the 3-week dark period. The basket holds thread, a tin of beeswax, the notebook with the speckled cover which is almost full now. You'll need a new one in January. Your feet on the cobblestones, the lamp throwing its circle. The city is busy, even at midnight, even in December. The brasseries are full. You can see through the windows the yellow light and the steam and the people pressed at the tables. And the tabacs are open, and the voices coming from somewhere up the hill suggest either a party or an argument, which in Montmartre are not always distinguishable. You've been in this city for 4 years and 3 months. You know it now in the way you know the dressing room. Not completely. Nobody knows Paris completely. The city is too large and too various and too constantly in the process of becoming something slightly different, but in the way that matters. You know which streets are which. You know which baker makes the bread worth the extra 5 minutes of walking. You know the face of the man who runs the bookshop on the Rue des Abbesses, who lets you stand in the doorway and read pages from books you can't afford to buy, and who has never once told you to stop, and to whom you have given, over 4 years, approximately 120 francs in actual purchases when you could spare it. You know Montmartre. You know the smell of it at every hour and in every season. You know the butte and the view from the top which you go to now when something is difficult, which is less often than it used to be, not because things have become less difficult, but because you have become better at knowing what the difficulty actually is, which is usually one of 3 things. Too much work without rest, a problem you haven't yet identified correctly, or something emotional that you're trying to manage as if it were a practical problem, which doesn't work. You turn left on the Rue des Abbesses. The light in Sylvie's half of the room is on. Good. She's still up. You climb the stairs. 2nd stair, 5th stair, the question mark at the top. Sylvie is sitting at the table with a cup of tisane and a letter, and she looks up when you come in with the expression of someone who has been waiting in a way that is almost but not quite patient. Good last show? She asks. Good show? You set down the basket. You sit across from her. Good season. You say that every season. I mean it every season. Sylvie hands you the tisane without asking. She's made enough for 2. She always makes enough for 2 on nights you work late, and goes back to her letter. You drink. The tisane is chamomile, which is what you've both been drinking since you moved in, because chamomile is the cheapest herb and it helps you sleep, and you've both decided that this is fine. I might leave the chorus, Sylvie says. She works at a different theatre, a smaller one, on the other side of the butte, and the Sylvie in the chorus has been less certain than the Sylvie at the dinner table for about 6 months, you've noticed. What would you do, you ask? I have an aunt in Bordeaux. She runs a dress shop. Would that make you happy? Sylvie is quiet. Outside the window, a cart passes, the horse's hooves on the cobblestones. a sound that's been in these streets for 1,000 years and will be replaced by motor cars within the decade probably. I don't know, she says. I came to Paris because I wanted the thing. The stage, the lights, the whole... She gestures, not quite finding the words. I wanted the version of it I imagined. What did you imagine? Something like what the audience sees. You look at her, she looks at you. Me too, you say. And what did you get? You look down at your hands. The knuckles reddened, the fingertips rough, the small callus on the inside of the right index finger from the needle. Something real, you say. Something that works. Sylvie drinks her tisane. The night is very quiet. That's better, isn't it? She says finally. I think so. Yes. The lamp on the table goes out at 1 a.m. Sylvie has gone to her side of the curtain. Her breathing slows. You sit in the dark for a while longer, not quite ready to give the day over. Your hands are still. No thread, no pins, no fabric. Through the window, the sky over Montmartre, the specific dark of winter, the stars invisible behind the layer of light that the city throws up even at this hour. The bakery beginning to warm. Somewhere, the bells of a church you don't know the name of, striking once for the quarter hour. You think about the dressing room, not with the exhaustion that used to accompany this thought in the early months, when the thinking about it meant also thinking about all the things that had gone wrong and all the things that still needed doing. Now you think about it the way you might think about a place where something real has happened to you, a place that has shaped the shape of your days, the costumes on the rail, covered now for the dark period, the 4 kilograms of the midnight moon headdress, the chemical smell of greasepaint, the coal stove, the sound of the orchestra tuning, filtering through the building heard from the wing, the girls, bet at centre stage for 30 seconds before every show, Emile at her mirror with absolute concentration, Thérèse holding her chin at 2 degrees down, Victoire stepping into the costume in 9 seconds, the fastest in the company, Clémentine favouring her ankle just slightly in jump sequences, Madame Arnaud with her clipboard and her cracked knuckles and her 27 years of knowledge held in her hands, and now, slowly, in pages, Madeleine's voice, doing the thing with the air. The audience in the dark, all of them pointed at the stage, all of them given over for 2 hours to the thing that the girls and the costumes and the headdresses and the orchestra make together. From the front of the house, feathers and sequins and the light catching it, all, the glamour, the gold. From the wing, 22 seconds per headdress, 4 prongs, 4 kilograms. Both true, both real. You get up, you go to bed. The sounds of the city, the cart gone, the baker's oven warming, somewhere the sound of music from a brasserie that stays open past legal closing, a piano, not Tibor, somebody else, playing something that doesn't sound like a cabaret number, something quieter. You close your eyes. The cold is different now, on the edge of sleep. It becomes abstract, the body warm enough, the blanket's weight a fact of presence, grounding. You can feel the day's work in your hands even now, the ghost of it, the thread's tension, the give and take of fabric under a needle, the specific resistance of gross-grain ribbon pulling tight at a corner. These are not bad sensations to fall asleep with. They are the sensations of something that was done well, that held, that got through the night. Your breath slows. The city doesn't stop. It never stops, not really, but it quiets, and the quieting is its own music. The low, persistent note of a city at 3 a.m, the occasional voice, the horse now replaced by the sound of an early motor car somewhere on the boulevard, its engine a different note, the future entering the present, which is always happening, which you can never feel while it's happening. Let the day go now. It's already going. The costumes are covered, the stove is banked, the hooks are closed, and the headdresses are racked, and the notebook is in the basket, and the basket is on its hook by the door. Everything is where it belongs. The sequence of tomorrow is already forming at the back of your mind. The understudy fitting, the season opening repairs, the new production meeting at 2. But tomorrow is not here. Tomorrow is still a hypothetical. Tonight is what's real, and what's real is this room, this quiet, the sound of Sylvie's breathing through the curtain, the last cooling of the tisane in the cup on the table. Warm enough, safe enough, here enough. You have been in Paris for 4 years and 3 months. You're no longer the girl from Saint-Brieuc with the cardboard suitcase. You're not yet whatever you will be next. You are right now exactly this. And this is enough. The room is very dark. On the other side of the city, the cabarets are still running. The Moulin Rouge with its sails, the Folies with its enormous stage, the 100 smaller rooms where the jazz is playing and the champagne is being poured and the dancers are smiling, and it's all real, all of it. The glamour is real, the beauty is real, the art of it is real. And backstage in 100 dressing rooms in 5 by 7 meter spaces that smell of grease paint and coal smoke, and women working hard, someone like you is doing what you have done, is measuring the hem, is finding the hook, is placing the prong of a headdress on the correct point of the skull, so the frame balances, so the feathers fall straight, so the weight distributes itself across all 4 points, and the girl can walk out into the light and stand there and be the thing the audience paid to see. You made that possible. You make it possible every night. None of them in the audience know your name, and that is finally all right. That is how the thing is supposed to work. The magic requires the invisible hands. The dream requires the people who maintain its machinery at 2 in the morning with a needle and a lamp. You are one of those people. You are, in fact, becoming the best of those people in this building, which is not a small thing, which is in fact a very specific and real and hard-earned thing, the kind of thing that takes years and attention and the willingness to be wrong and to be shown why you're wrong and to do it again. Your hands are still. Finally. The thread is put down. Let the rest come. Centuries will pass. Paris will change past recognition, and also not change at all in the ways that matter. The cabarets will close and open and close and open. The Moulin Rouge will become a tourist destination, and the tourist will see the feathers and the sequins and the lights, and they will be right to be moved by them. Because the feathers and the sequins and the lights are real things, and real things can move people. But someone will still be backstage. Someone will always be backstage, in the room that smells of grease paint and women working, with a basket full of thread and spirit gum and a small bottle of hydrogen peroxide for blood on white fabric. Someone will still be counting musical phrases in the dark, still placing prongs on skulls with the precision of someone who has done it 1,000 times and knows that the 1,001st time still has to be exactly right. Some things don't change. The work that makes the dream possible doesn't change. The hands that hold the thing together don't change. The exhaustion at the end of a long day, and the satisfaction, which is different from happiness, and also better, the satisfaction of a thing that was done well, that doesn't change. You're lying in a small room in Montmartre in 1929, and somewhere far away from you, in time, people are listening to this. Maybe they're also tired. Maybe they've also spent their day holding something together, making something possible that other people will see and take for granted and not think about how it was made. If so, you're in good company. The work was real. You were real. Rest now. Let the sounds of the city become the sounds of wherever you are. Let the thought still and soften. Let the day release. You've earned this. Take it. Good night.